The perfect day in Armada, Michigan, betrayed no hint of what was to come. This serene city, a paradise of routine and safety, masked a dreadful secret hidden in plain sight. On that day, 14-year-old April, with her carefree smile and a heart full of innocence, unknowingly walked into the abyss. How often do we trust the safety of our neighborhoods, letting down our guard? What if the very places we deem secure are hunting grounds for those hiding behind polite smiles and manicured lawns? The unsettling answer lies in what unfolded that day. Monsters don't lurk in shadows or dark alleys. They live next door. They wave as you pass by, host neighborhood barbecues, and plan their heinous acts in the comfort of the places we trust most. If you're fascinated by unraveling the darkest mysteries and exploring gripping true crime stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and become part of our investigative community. Let's dive into the case. That sunny day in Armada shattered every illusion of safety when the predator, who had been watching April, decided to strike. Born on January 2, 2000, she lived a seemingly idyllic life despite her parents' divorce. Her father's relationship with David, her stepfather, brought warmth and support, creating a close-knit family dynamic. She was the kind of teenager everyone adored. Her charm, sharp wit, and kindness drew friends and family close. Her artistic talent and passion for animals hinted at a bright future as a veterinarian. Despite her independence, she remained deeply connected to those around her. Her boyfriend Austin, a year older, had been by her side for about a year. A tender young love. July 24, 2014 began unremarkably. The summer day stretched lazily ahead as April stayed home, chatting with friends and playing computer games. By 6 p.m., she decided to take her dog, Penny, for a walk along her usual route. It was a routine outing, one she had taken countless times before, often joined by Austin or friends. But this evening was different. As April strolled through the familiar paths of Armada, her smile, her dreams, and her youthful vibrance were being watched. Somewhere in the shadows, someone waited. Not a stranger to fear, but a manipulator of trust. Someone who would exploit the false sense of security that small towns are known for. April's walk was meant to be no more than an hour, but this time, it stretched into eternity. A chapter of darkness that would send shivers through anyone who dared to believe they were safe. The scene on the trail was one of chaos and growing horror. Jennifer, her mother, trembled as she frantically called David, tears choking her words as she explained what Austin had revealed. April's short, haunting message, "Someone tried to kidnap me," echoed in their minds as they scrambled to organize the search. David drove home like a man possessed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Austin and his friend were already canvassing the familiar walking paths she frequented. But with every passing minute, dread clawed deeper into their hearts. Jennifer, clutching her phone, couldn't bring herself to stop dialing her daughter's number, though every attempt met the same lifeless voicemail. When the police arrived, their lack of experience was immediately apparent. Armada's officers, accustomed to handling minor disturbances, looked shaken as they gathered information from Jennifer and David. Still, they coordinated an immediate search, calling in reinforcements from neighboring departments to widen the area of focus. As twilight faded into a heavy darkness, a jogger's discovery shifted the tone from worried anticipation to outright panic. The jogger, a middle-aged man, had been running the wooded trail with his wife when they encountered Penny, April's loyal dog. The usually energetic collie was trembling, its fur matted with dirt and leaves, its leash dragging limply behind. The couple tried to comfort the animal, but Penny's erratic behavior, darting ahead, barking, then stopping to look back, seemed almost deliberate. It was as if she was leading them somewhere. Following Penny's frantic movements, the couple stumbled through dense underbrush until they reached a steep ravine. The air was heavy, the forest eerily silent, save for the woman's scream when she saw what lay below. April's lifeless body was sprawled at the bottom of the gully, her pale skin streaked with dirt and blood. The vibrant girl who had left her house hours earlier was now unrecognizable. Her shoes, removed and discarded, lay several feet away, a grim testament to her struggle. By the time Jennifer and David arrived, the area was swarming with investigators. The parents were held back by officers who gently but firmly refused them access. Jennifer's desperate cries echoed through the night, her anguish cutting through the cool summer air. Forensic teams from the county combed the scene with grim precision. Evidence was scarce, save for the disturbed foliage and the position of April's body. No immediate suspects, no apparent motive, just the devastating reality of a brutal crime committed in a place that prided itself on safety. April Millsap, the bright, kind-hearted girl who had once brought joy to everyone around her, was now the center of a nightmare that would forever haunt Armada. Her family, shattered and numb, could only wait as the wheels of justice began their slow, uncertain turn. The crime scene painted a grotesque picture of unimaginable violence. April's body lay battered and bloodied, her clothes and underwear pulled down in what seemed to suggest a sexual motive. Yet, forensic analysis confirmed that no sexual assault had occurred. Detectives speculated that an attempt might have been made, but April's fierce resistance appeared to have thwarted the attacker's plans. Or perhaps the perpetrator had been interrupted. Bruises covered her small frame, marking every place where she had tried to fight back. Defensive wounds scarred her hands and arms, while her face bore the brunt of the brutality. It was so disfigured that it was almost unrecognizable, the coroner later counting 48 distinct injuries concentrated on her face and neck. Blood clotted over the wounds, a haunting testament to the prolonged nature of the assault. Among the injuries, strange impressions stood out on her face and neck, the patterned marks of a shoe's tread. The forensic report concluded that the killer had trampled April to death, pressing the sole of a sneaker repeatedly into her body. The distinct marks suggested a large shoe, consistent with a tall man's build. The level of force used and the deliberate nature of the act indicated a prolonged and agonizing death, lasting over 10 minutes. The injuries made visual identification impossible, leaving her loved ones to rely on her clothing and jewelry to confirm her identity. When her mother, Jennifer, saw her daughter's belongings, she collapsed in grief. The reality of April's fate, her bright, spirited girl reduced to an unrecognizable victim of monstrous violence, was almost too much to bear. Detectives quickly moved to establish a timeline and potential suspects. As April's family, her mother, stepfather, boyfriend Austin, and his friend, were questioned, the investigators began piecing together the final hours of her life. While her father and stepfather were swiftly ruled out, Austin's statements raised eyebrows. The young man admitted to recent quarrels with April, revealing that their relationship had become strained in the weeks leading up to her death. Their latest argument, mere days before the murder, had left lingering resentment. Suspicion deepened when detectives learned about the haunting message April had sent Austin just before her death, stating, "Someone tried to kidnap me." Austin's response, or lack thereof, drew sharp scrutiny. He claimed he hadn't seen the message in time, blaming technical delays. But detectives found his reaction strangely indifferent. Instead of alerting authorities, he had dismissed the message as a ploy for attention, assuming it was April's way of rekindling their strained connection. The detectives pressed Austin for details about his movements on the day of the murder. He recounted helping a friend move a television in the late afternoon, offering what seemed like a casual alibi. Yet, doubts lingered, and officers decided to detain him for further questioning, determined to verify every detail of his story. As the investigation unfolded, April's family clung to each other, grappling with the unimaginable. The brutality of the crime and the possibility of betrayal by someone close left them reeling, their lives forever changed by the horrors uncovered on that lonely trail. James Van Callis, a man whose name would soon dominate local headlines, initially seemed cooperative and unbothered as detectives questioned him. His demeanor was calm, his tone casual, as he recounted his day during April's murder. He described visiting his friend's home in Armada, where he claimed to have spent the afternoon, occasionally stepping outside to inspect the rare motorcycle parked in the driveway. Detectives, however, had already begun scrutinizing his story. The distinctive blue and white motorcycle, so vividly described by witnesses, became the center of their focus. He admitted to owning the vehicle, but insisted it was coincidental that his bike matched the description of the one spotted near April. Forensic teams were dispatched to seize the motorcycle, combing it for any trace evidence that could tie it to the crime. Fibers, prints, or even a stray hair could provide a damning connection. Meanwhile, detectives canvassed his neighborhood, speaking with anyone who might have seen or interacted with him on the day in question. As investigators dug deeper, inconsistencies began to surface in his account. A neighbor reported seeing the motorcycle leave the driveway that evening, contradicting his claim that he hadn't ridden it that day. Even more troubling was a second witness who described seeing a man resembling James walking along the wooded trails where April's body had been discovered. Detectives began piecing together a timeline that put James near the crime scene at the exact time April was attacked. Their suspicions deepened when forensic analysts found dirt and plant material on the motorcycle's tires, consistent with vegetation from the trail. This discovery raised an alarming question. Could James have ridden the motorcycle through the very path where April had her last moments? At the same time, his personal life came under scrutiny. His criminal record revealed a history of minor infractions, none violent, but enough to cast a shadow on his character. Interviews with acquaintances painted a picture of a man whose temper flared easily and whose relationships were often volatile. Detectives pressed harder, focusing on his demeanor during questioning. Though he maintained his innocence, subtle changes in his posture and tone betrayed a growing unease. Forensic experts collected additional samples from his clothing and home, searching for any DNA or fibers that might connect him to April. The tension mounted when the results of April's phone analysis came back. A chilling clue emerged. Her phone had connected briefly to a Wi-Fi network near James's friend's house, moments before it was powered off for good. This connection placed both April and her phone in proximity to James, tightening the web of suspicion around him. After his ex-girlfriend Crystal testified, detectives moved quickly and used her account of James's black and white Air Jordans as a key clue. The missing sneakers were found after a careful search of James's land and the places around it. They combed through dumpsters, storage sheds, and even the surrounding woods, suspecting he might have discarded them in haste. The investigation intensified when neighbors reported seeing him burning items in a fire pit the night after April's murder. Detectives recovered the ashes from the pit, hoping to find remnants of the shoes or any other incriminating evidence. Forensic analysis of the ashes revealed fragments of melted rubber and charred fabric consistent with footwear materials. Though this was not definitive proof, it added weight to the suspicion that he had destroyed key evidence. Meanwhile, Crystal provided more damning details about James's behavior on the day of the murder. She recalled that he returned home late, his demeanor tense and irritable. His explanation about working on the bike didn't align with his meticulous cleaning spree, which she described as obsessive. She also noted that his jacket and pants, which he frequently wore while riding, were never seen again after that night. Investigators expanded their search to pawn shops and secondhand stores, suspecting James might have sold or dumped the items elsewhere. A break came when a shop owner from a nearby town reported purchasing a pair of black and white sneakers from a man fitting James's description the morning after the murder. The sneakers were immediately recovered and sent to the forensic lab. The soles were an exact match to the distinctive tread marks found on April's body. Additionally, microscopic traces of April's blood and hair were discovered embedded in the seams. This find was the first undeniable physical link between James and the crime scene. Crystal's cooperation didn't end with her initial statement. She shared a series of disturbing texts James had sent her after the murder. One message chillingly read, "You don't know what I'm capable of. Stay quiet, and you'll be fine." With the sneakers, texts, and Crystal's testimony in hand, detectives pieced together a timeline and motive. They believed James had encountered April on the trail, struck up a conversation, and lured her into a false sense of security before the attack escalated. His calculated attempts to erase evidence only underscored his guilt. The trial commenced in January 2016, drawing national attention as the prosecution presented its case against James Van Callis Jr. The courtroom was packed, with April's grieving family sitting silently in the front row. He maintained a composed, almost indifferent demeanor, despite the overwhelming weight of the accusations against him. The prosecution began with the chilling fitness app data from April's phone. They used the metrics to recreate her final moments, showing how her heart rate spiked and her movements became erratic as she fought for her life. The timeline of her escape attempt, overlaid with James's motorcycle path recorded by nearby surveillance cameras, left the jury visibly shaken. Testimonies from witnesses further solidified the prosecution's narrative. Joggers who had seen James on the trail that evening identified his distinctive blue and white motorcycle and described his unsettling presence. They recounted seeing him walking near April, seemingly calm and unbothered, just moments before her disappearance. Crystal delivered a key testimony. Her detailed account of his obsessive cleaning spree after April's murder, the mysterious disappearance of his black and white sneakers, and the threatening messages he sent her, painted a harrowing picture of control and intimidation. Her voice trembled as she recalled how James had manipulated her life, warning her to stay quiet about his actions. The defense worked to dismantle the prosecution's case, focusing on the absence of direct physical evidence. They argued that no DNA or blood directly linked James to April, and that the case relied on circumstantial evidence. They challenged Crystal's credibility, suggesting her testimony stemmed from resentment rather than truth. The sneakers recovered from a pawnshop became a pivotal piece of evidence. Forensic analysis confirmed that the tread pattern matched the marks found on April's body. Traces of melted rubber found in his fire pit further supported the argument that he had destroyed the original pair. The prosecution also introduced disturbing evidence from his computer. His search history revealed an obsessive interest in young girls, manipulation tactics, and methods of evading detection. This discovery painted a disturbing portrait of a man whose dark fantasies had escalated into brutal violence. The defense countered by urging the jury to consider the lack of direct proof. They emphasized that the prosecution's case was built on inferences and warned against convicting based solely on assumptions. As the jury deliberated, tension filled the courtroom. April's mother, Jennifer, clutched a photograph of her daughter, her silent tears mirroring the anguish of her family. James sat motionless, his face betraying no emotion. The weight of the evidence and the tragedy of April's death hung heavily in the room, leaving the jury with the task of delivering justice in one of the most harrowing cases the small town of Armada had ever faced. James Van Callis Jr. was found guilty on all counts: attempted kidnapping, rape, and premeditated murder. The weight of the unanimous decision rippled through the room. Gasps of relief mixed with muffled sobs from April's family, while James sat stoic, his face betraying no emotion as his fate was sealed: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jennifer stood to address the court during sentencing. Her voice, though trembling, carried a conviction born of unimaginable grief. She described April's vibrancy, her kindness, and the unfulfilled potential that had been snuffed out by James's cruelty. "No parent should have to bury their child," she said, glaring at James. "And certainly not because of the twisted desires of a man who could not take no for an answer." Despite the damning evidence and the jury's verdict, James remained defiant. He refused to admit guilt, his appeals filed immediately after sentencing showing his unwillingness to accept responsibility. His attempts to overturn the decision failed, leaving him to spend the rest of his life behind bars. In the wake of the trial, the community of Armada rallied around April's family. A memorial garden was created near the trail where her life had been stolen. At its center stood a statue of Penny, the loyal dog who led strangers to her owner's body. The garden became a place of solace and remembrance, a sanctuary where grief was met with solidarity. April's case sparked widespread reflection on the dangers lurking, even in the safest-seeming places. Advocacy groups used her story to raise awareness about violence against women and children, emphasizing the need for vigilance and education. Seminars were held in schools across the state, teaching students and parents alike how to recognize and respond to predatory behavior. Though justice had been served, the scars of the tragedy lingered. The Millsap family, though grateful for the community's support, faced a lifetime of healing. April's friends planted trees in her honor, each one a reminder of the joy she had brought into their lives. James's incarceration provided some closure, but for many, it was the communal response, the unity in the face of horror, that offered the most hope. Her story, though heartbreaking, became a rallying cry for change, a legacy of resilience born from the darkest of days.